So right now, I would like to invite our first speaker to the podium. That is Craig Cuttner with HBO. Come up and take it away, Craig.
Thanks. And first, let me start off by saying thank you to Jenny, Michelle, Tim, and Anthony, and especially Ted. There is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. I have absolutely nothing to do with it, and even though I've done this for a number of years, I have no clue why they keep inviting me back. And I'd also like to give a big shout out to the Connecticut stream. I live in Norwalk, and I get your email, and I swear someday I'm really going to come to a meeting, but it's challenging for me to come from the city to Connecticut and then keep going up there. Welcome to the Mark Schubin warm-up show. I'm here all week, try the veal, and tip the waitstaff. I'm Craig Cuttner, and I'm in the HBO Advanced Technology Group. It's worth describing that a little bit. HBO, of course, does production, it does post, it does distribution. I'm on the distribution side, more focused on the consumption of our products and how they fit into the consumer space. NAB for us is somewhat like a leading technology innovation showcase. Not so much as it used to be, when you could actually see the trail of content production working from origination through distribution through the very robust broadcast chain. Now broadcasters are getting a run for their money by the IT guys, the consumer space. In fact, the first 4K camera that I actually saw and played with was at the Consumer Electronics Show, and it was $5,000 from JVC. That was the sort of leading indicator from that technology perspective. The NAB this year had a little more asymmetry than I'm used to. One of my indicators is to walk around the floor, and I had lots of meetings scattered about. And one of the things that was true this time was I saw even fewer transmitters and fewer towers. I think the issue is the broadcasters have completed the digital transition, and RF, talked about Ed's point, RF is a dying art unto itself as well. So I'm sure the broadcasters won't mind. In fact, I occasionally, being a CBS alum, take shots at broadcasters. I'm sure they won't mind now that everyone has a website, everybody produces content for the web, that the broadcasters certainly won't mind migrating to Wi-Fi on white spaces. No problem at all. And in fact, if you think about taking that to the next step, Facebook is probably going to displace Nielsen, and sweeps will be done with like buttons. You hit the little thumbs up, and that'll be your rating. And taking that even further, once the page scrolls 3 pages down, that'll be the end of C3. So you have to get your rating in before the 3 pages anyway. But seriously, I do also want to mention the amount of effort that goes into HBO's attendance at NAB. And then I also want to give a shout out to our media and production operations group. They literally go with dozens of people. They spend months in advance with charts and schedules. And it's amazing to watch vendors cower when some of our operations folks come with project schedules wondering where the deliverables are. So Chris D., shout out if you're here from our 23rd Street group. The other thing I'd like to mention is just the areas of focus. So I'll sort of just run through, knowing that it is the Mark Show, but I won't touch on all the topics. I'll just use a couple of metrics that cause HBO to be really interested in NAB. One statistic from our CTO, and this, sure you think of HBO as having 26 feeds, and in fact this week, for those of you who are an aficionado of high def, this week we ceased origination of standard def. We still transmit it, but now it's derived from high def. And that was a watershed moment for us because the servers literally had the wheels falling off on the standard def side. But our statistic is 5 years ago, HBO would produce 500 hours of content a month to keep our basic machine running. Standard def, high def, on-demand, linear, 500 hours. Last month, they produced in our operations group 110,000 hours of content. That's for the various flavors of platforms. Go, shout out for Go. Everyone get HBO Go? It's well, So now that used to get a laugh because Time Warner Cable didn't have it, but now since it's 99% distributed, that means you don't have HBO. Doors up there. So 110,000 hours a month begs the question, it doesn't scale. And then someone pointed out that it was a logarithmic scale, and no one really paid attention to that. So I knew that DBs were useful for something that wasn't audio, but I didn't know that it was the amount of workflow. So in our workflow effort, we're big users of Telestream, and we're really fond of Elemental, which is a GPU-based encoding system. Very, very fast, lots of power, lots of heat, but lots of fast throughput, and that really matters. So those guys were represented at NAB, did a really good job. We're also an Aspera shop. We use that for a lot of content delivery, and in fact are moving from, in the case of file-based on-demand, moving a lot from satellite to unicast on the internet, which is a whole challenge in itself. Also up on the HBO list, J2K ASO2 as mezzanine incoming format, big effort in that, and lots of LTO storage, lots of LTO storage. So we also were enamored with the fact that James Cameron is now in the 3D for profit business and was touting that 3D doesn't cost anything anymore. It will be interesting to see what Mark has to say about that. Although there is an argument it's not worth anything. No, I'm sorry, I won't go there. We also looked at 4K, and I mentioned that the 4K camera showed up at CES, but I really wonder from my particular focus on the distribution side if consumers are ready to connect their display with 4 HDMI cables to some as yet uninvented box. So there's some challenges on the 4K side. And in fact, one of the other things that was a key focus is, how is that distribution exactly going to work? H.264 is known and reduced to practice, but not level 5, which you need to do for 4K. And for the purposes of HEVC, which is the next great codec, there were demos at NAB, mostly canned, of HEVC, the next great codec. But there's also a lot of discussion about the intellectual property associated with that codec. So if you think about and just look in the pages of any newspaper, the lawsuits and litigation flying back and forth over IP, I'm not so sure that the adoption of HEVC is that clean and in the time frame that people are expecting it to show up. Last but not least, let's get ready for our big holiday present from the government, the COM Act. Every vendor was there with their magic box that's going to fix it. And I can tell you from the SDO side of the world, the standards organizations, the paint's still a little wet. Or to be more appropriate for this kind of medium, the fused toner is not yet fused to the dead tree pulp. But we do use Dolby for our nonlinear file processing for COM. We use linear acoustic as the backstop for live programming. But the COM Act is going to be a hard act to follow. And that's probably a good tee up for Mark because he is the hard act to follow. And I will, again, give a shout out to Connecticut and hold the Q&A till the end just for you guys. So thanks, and now on with the Mark Show.
Okay. Thanks. Should I use the clicker, I guess?
Yes.
Okay. Picture at the right was shot by Craig. He saw me on the floor. He liked the fact that I had Band-Aids all over my feet.
It was day 1.
It was day 2 for me. Second part of day 2. So this year's NAB was a little different. Here's a new hotel that was in Las Vegas. Photo by Adam Wilt. And you'll see a bunch of photos by him because he takes nice pictures and therefore I don't have to. What didn't arrive? On the left side here you see a disaster recovery booth. Pixel Power had the misfortune of having their booth be in a container that was selected for random radiological testing, which takes several weeks. So they had to build a booth from scratch, made many, many trips to Fry's and now know what it's like to put together a facility in a hurry. On the other hand, over here was the Waze booth, and it looked like they had everything in the booth except for the people. The Radio and Television News Directors Association typically had their convention associated with NAB, not this year, but I am happy to report that the coffee restriction at Snell is now gone. Snell has always had excellent espresso machines, but you needed to have somebody from Snell take you to the back so that you could get the espresso. Now anyone can go in and get their espresso. Analog lives. This is a Humbuck company. And here's NAB's map of the North Hall, and NAB has decided that there should be an anchor tenant in every hall. So Sony is in the Central Hall with Panasonic, and Blackmagic Design is in the South Lower Hall, and Dolby in the South Upper Hall, and so on. So these yellow guys here are the anchor tenants for the North Hall. Unfortunately, right after NAB, Harris announced that they're getting out of the business. So much for that. Two other interesting parts of the North Hall is this section over here and this section over here, and I'll show you close-ups. This is the section over here, the karaoke lounge and the gaming lounge. NAB is all work. I want to point that out. That's why you can see this person has a serious expression on his face. That is the original Zoltar from Big. And just lest you think that this stuff happens only in the North Hall, this was in the Central Hall. Have a bounce on us. Okay, but my favorite part of the North Hall, my favorite part of NAB in general, is becoming the International Research Park. And these are some of the things that were there. By the way, anything that I put in yellow, I'll be talking more about later. Anything that's in sort of a pinkish color is just for emphasis, but I'm not going to talk about it more later. A company called Go HDR, and they're doing high dynamic range stuff. They're saying, oh, you know, why should we talk about 14 stops, 15 stops? Let's talk about 30 stops. So they're doing 30-bit per color video and compressing it 150 to 1. I'll show you more about that later. Then Project Fine from the EU. The FINE stands for Free Viewpoint Immersive Networked Experience, but basically what it means is you stick a few cameras in the top of a stadium. The system figures out the 3D space by the differences between those cameras, and then can position a camera anywhere in that 3D space, including behind looking at the cameras that are defining the 3D space. Unfortunately, currently there's about a 10-second per frame processing time. But they're hoping that maybe by next year they'll be farther along. Zaxcell Systems, Craig was talking about 4K. They're currently doing 4K streaming in 60 megabits. They are on the verge of introducing 15 megabits for 4K. And they are building a 2K 3D 120 frame per second player for Doug Trumbull. NPR Laboratories, some fun stuff, something called captioned radio. I'm not quite sure what the difference is between that and text. An electronic brailer. This is if you're blind, you just stick your finger on it and it's like the Times Square zipper, the letters come to you. And then this one, which was a really brilliant idea, bed shaker. Let's say you have all these wonderful alerts for the hearing impaired and the visually impaired, and they're in bed. So how do they know there's a problem? So this thing shakes bed, and then you go to your electronic brailer or your captioned radio and find out what's going on. And then there was NICT, which is always the most magnificent thing at NAB whenever they're there. NICT stands for the National Institute of Information and Communications Technologies. It's a Japanese institute. 3 years ago, they were at NAB with live holography. Those of you who were here 3 years ago may remember some of these pictures. You had to go into a dark area. This was a granite optical table. The big arrow told you roughly where to look, so you could find the smaller arrow that told you a little bit better where to look, so that you could look at something about the size of my pinky nail, which was the live hologram, and had about a 2-degree viewing angle. But still very exciting. It was the world's first full-color live hologram, or one of the world's first anyway. And that's what it looked like, kind of like the worst YouTube picture you've ever seen. They also had something called a multisensory system, which had 3D visuals, stereo sound, and tactile feedback. You could hold a stylus in thin air and feel it rub over the ridges of a coin or something like that. Well, this year, Nick improved on the multisensory system, still 3D visuals, now 3D surround sound, now not only tactile push, but also tactile pull. You could have your stylus inside a balloon and pull on it until you made the membrane pop. And when the membrane popped, you smelled whatever was inside the balloon. So they've added a smell sensor to it. But more exciting, no glasses, viewpoint shifting, 200-inch 3D. And this is the system. This is an actual photo that I shot of it. That's computer graphic creature of some sort. There's people looking at it. Again, no glasses 3D, but if this person walked over to where this person is, he could look around this creature. And it's high definition, 60 frames per second. Also, very simple apparatus. This is nothing like the live holography. 200 projectors involved, but these days 200 projectors not that difficult to do. Condensing lens, again, not too difficult to do. This is something that you could put into a venue almost immediately. And there's sort of the difference in the images. That's if you're standing towards the left, what you would see, and that's if you're standing towards the right, what you would see. And you can see, you can look inside the car. This was the year of helicopters. Now, there have always been toy helicopters at NAB. There was a guy in the central hall by the restaurants who would sell them, and they'd have cameras on them. That was about it. This year, every hall, all over the place, helicopters, and not just regular helicopters, but dual rotors, quadricopters, hexacopters, octocopters, drones, and blimps. And this one even has an LED-lit helipad, lest your helicopter doesn't know where to go. This one's about 6 feet long, and those of you who are familiar with the Axis system, that's a full-size broadcast camera in there, 3-chip, 2/3 inch CCDs with 7-axis stabilization. There's another one, there's another one, there's another one, and the lowest special show price at the show that I saw was $349 for the helicopter and the controller. You still had to add your own camera. And that was kind of interesting because when I came home, I got a Brookstone catalog in the mail, and they have the AR drone for less than $300, including the video camera and 2 ARF. That's the indoor model, that's the outdoor model. But this was over at Lockheed Martin. This is your own drone if you want to have a fixed-wing drone. Do what you will with it. But Rich Torpy pointed out to me this thing, which is their Mako inflatable blimp, controllable up to 1,200 feet, unlicensed, doesn't need any lights. Does this sound like a good thing to do in crowded airspace? Okay, some of the issues that were discussed at NAB, the second screen. So how do we deliver to the second screen? Could be mobile DTV, could be via broadband. What is the second screen? Could be the world's largest laptop, could be a tablet, could be a smartphone. But notice we have a problem here. This is showing the exact same picture as that. Well, here you can sort of see there's some people. Can you even tell what that picture is? So can you do a second screen? No, you have to do second screen for everything that you're distributing. And where do we do second screen? Well, home, sure, fine. Here's typical home television environment. Mom is reading the newspaper. Maybe sis over here is doing homework. Common at home. But do it in the cinema? At the SMPTE Technology Summit for Cinema, there was a session on second screen in the cinema, and people talking about, oh, don't worry, we'll put in software so that it doesn't light up during the movie or something like that. Yeah. Okay, going beyond HDTV, you heard from Bill about new color gamuts. There wasn't a lot of discussion at NAB about new color gamuts, primarily concern about XVYCC, which is a consumer system of expanding the color gamut, but it does that to whatever you send it, regardless of what that is, whether it's something that you did with an expanded color gamut or not. But there was a discussion of color gamut and laser projection. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Higher dynamic range, RED introduced the 15-stop Dragon sensor upgrade. which also happens to be 6K at 85 frames per second or 120 frames per second at 5K, it's also a little bigger than the old sensors. And that means that with some lenses, there's going to be vignetting. And then Go HDR again, their motto is 16 f-stops is not enough. And again, they're talking 30 f-stops. Here's their system. This is a weld, and this photo is properly exposed for the weld, and this one is properly exposed for something else. They combine all of this into a high dynamic range image. And then discussion of 3D, higher frame rates, and high resolution. 3D, the new introduction was 5D. And there you are, the Camera and Pace group introducing 5D. What is 5D? It's 2D plus 3D. So last year there was the shadow system at Fujinon. Now they have expanded the shadow system into all of their production. The idea being that you can do 2D and 3D production at the same time, not taking the 2D as one of the 3D views, but having one operator per camera position, not per camera. There was a new introduction of something called Dolby 3D. We've previously had Dolby 3D, which was for a very nice eye selection system. Now it's processing for each display type. So again, if you're going to do 3D on a smartphone, you'll have different processing than if you do 3D on a 70-inch home TV. There was more autostereoscopy, which is 3D without glasses, but nothing that I would write home about. But the exciting stuff for me was this 3D space creation. I mentioned Project Find before, and I'll show you a little bit more about that. Camargus had a system. There's 16 cameras in here, and if you stick that at one end of a ball field, you get this sort of system, and then you can stitch all the camera images together and select a camera point of view anywhere in there. 3D warping at Caliber. This is a curved screen curving outwards, and yet they were able to put a 3D signal onto it. And then 2D to 3D, you may recall JVC was one of the first companies to say, oh yeah, we have this cheap box, you stick in 2D and out comes 3D. This year they admitted, well, it doesn't always work. So now they're saying, use our box, make the 2D to 3D, and then after you're done using the box, stick it into an edit suite where somebody looks at it and fixes the problems that don't work. This was one of the most fascinating things to me at NAB. It was discussions of shutter angle. It was the very last session at the Technology Summit for Cinema. Two very important organizations. One is Park Road Post. Those of you who are not familiar with it, that's Wellington Harbour in New Zealand, and that's where Peter Jackson has his studios, and Park Road Post is part of that group. And they did tests of a bunch of different frame rates and exposures. Now, as you might expect, as the frame rate increased from 24 to 48 or 60, it got more video-like. That's something we've known back since the days of Showtime, of ShowScan. But what we didn't really appreciate so much, when they went from 270-degree shutter angle to 360-degree angle, it became much more video-like. So going from 270 to 360 at 24 frames per second had more of an effect on the video look than going from 24 to 60. And the same thing happened at whatever frame rate it was. When they went from 270 to 360, there was this jump in video look. By the way, there was a toy sword distortion issue. It was this room full of engineers, and they're all analyzing the pictures and trying to figure out what's distorted. And oh, we see the swords, and they're bending. There's a problem. Well, they were toy swords, and they bent. Now, Fraunhofer also showed a similar kind of test, except this was actually changing the frame rate and the shutter angle on what was being shot. Fraunhofer just shot everything with an Alexa at 120 frames per second and a 356-degree shutter angle. So if they derived by taking one frame, that was like going to a 72-degree shutter angle. If they took 3 frames, that was like going to a 216-degree shutter angle. And they also tried doing alternating eyes, left and right, left and right, left and right. And they had some interesting things associated with shutter angles also. The larger the shutter angle, the less the depth in the 3D. Also, the alternating left-right, even when it matched what was being shot, when what was shot and what was being seen was exactly the same, created ghost images. They were shooting some boxing, and as the hands went like this, they would be transparent as they went in and out. So those were kind of interesting things in that session. Higher frame rate gives you a reduction of the alternating eye 3D motion artifacts. It makes things more real or more video-like if you prefer. Not necessarily always a good thing, but there's more equipment available. This is Sony's NEX FS700U, costs less than $8,000. It's a 4K camcorder and will shoot full HD out to 240 frames per second. And Mark Foreman shot some wonderful dog drool footage with it, absolutely spectacular. But one problem, even though the Hobbit is being done in 48 frame per second, 270 degree shutter angle, there's a low percentage of cinemas equipped to see it so far. So what happens if you go to high frame rate and not everybody can see it? It's a direct multiple of the raw information rate. So if you go from 24 to 48, that's 2 times the amount of data. But your pixels become less blurry, which means easier motion estimation, and there's less change between frames. So the increase in frame rate, there might not even be an increase in data rate. It might be less. Mark, you had a question?
The camera is not yet 4K capable. It's a 2K camera with a future 4K upgrade.
Sorry, but it has a 4K sensor in it. So you get potentially a lower compressed data rate from those advantages. By the way, the best 3D demo at the show, I was working on a hypothesis. All 3D demos are bad. And it failed, and the only place it failed was at the Christie demo, which used James Cameron's high frame rate test material, but that was shot entirely around a table, something like this, so it wasn't really a big test of depth. There's an alternative that was shown at NAB and at the HPA Tech Retreat to going to higher frame rate to get rid of some of the problems of 24 frames per second, the strobing and false motion, the wagon wheels going backwards effect. And it's called the Tessive time filter. And it's basically an LCD filter that you stick in front of your lens, and it operates at a sort of Gaussian rate of turning on and off. And if you change from 180 degree shutter to 360 degree shutter and allow this to fill in, it kind of gets rid of the artifacts. There's been big discussions about what the science is behind this, and lots of debate, people saying, oh no, you're full of it, no, you're full of it. But there seems to be agreement that it does work. If you have 24 frame material and you use this thing on it, it does smooth it out. So then there's beyond HD resolution, and this is the 4K, 8K stuff that people are talking about. It's more detail. If that's an HD picture, then this would be effectively a 4K picture. You can do reframing and image stabilization in post without messing up your HD at all. You can do single sensor 3D. This is the ZPAR 3D lens on a Phantom 65. There are lots of people making cameras. All of the people in white had been making cameras before NAB. The people in this color added cameras at NAB. The people in this color have shown balsa wood cameras but are saying they're going to do something. And the people in gray showed cameras but are not really in the business of selling them at the moment. But unlike high frame rate and unlike 3D, there are reasons to do 4K now and to shoot in 4K, edit in 4K, and that's increased sharpness, whether you deliver it to the home or not. Here are some real-world MTF curves for some old Canon cameras. That's the EOS 10D, the EOS 20D. That's the red line for the 10D, the blue line for the 20D. The difference in sensor photo sites is 14%. So that's all you have, and yet that has pushed the MTF curve sufficiently to the right. 4K over HD, by the way, is a 213% increase. Here is the result, looking at a portion of an image. Now, never mind whether you can read either side or whether you can see everything on either side. I think most of you in the room will agree this side looks sharper than this side, and that's the advantage. Looking at 4K on an HD TV, you will get sharper looking pictures. Just as looking at HD on an NTSC TV, you get sharper looking pictures. So those are reasons why 4K is a good thing, even if people don't get to experience it at home. Now getting into the products, acquisition, mounts, lighting, and optics. This is not new products, but both Cambotics and FX Motion were acquired by Ross Video. And this I find to be a really good thing for us. One, Ross is based in North America. Two, Ross has maybe the best customer service policy of any company in the business. So that's exciting. Telemetrics introduced an elevator. P&S Technic introduced a micro 3D mirror rig. So this is a very easily hand-holdable or shoulder-mountable mirror rig system. In lighting, more LED systems. This is the Xylight F8. It's a Fresnel. That's how thick it is. Like an inch, inch and a half, something like that. Plasma lighting. This company called Hive is using RF excited krypton plasma. And the exciting field is 450 megahertz. So it's going to be a long time before we have a frame rate lighting issue with that system. On the other hand, it's a gigantic shielded light system because they have to keep the 450 megahertz from getting out. Cast, brilliant thing, the BlackTrack 6D. The 6D stands for 6 dimensions because it tracks things as they move around in 3 dimensions, but it also tracks the yaw, pitch, and roll of whatever the thing is. So they showed it at the show on a slot car system, and there was this slot car racing around, and they had a spotlight, and the spotlight was tracking the slot car and never missing. So that was kind of cool, and that's the size of it, very small. In optics, Ira Tiffin sold his filter business, but he didn't sell his filter know-how, so he's still introducing filters, and this one he showed up with, it's called a purple anamorphic flare filter, and that's the result of it. And then Fujinon had this very nice lens. It was shown, but it doesn't exist. I went over to it and said, wow, you know, long lens that starts at 8.5, and they said, yeah, well, is that a good idea? Would you rather it start at 8? Yeah. What do you think it should be? Oh, well. More on LED lighting. PRG says, yeah, LED lights are nice, but they're not necessarily reliable in color rendering index. So why don't we simply use blue LEDs to excite a phosphor layer and use the light off the phosphor layer? And so these are the lights that they introduced from that. They call it true color. And an additional advantage is this is what's emitting the light, the phosphor layer, and so you don't have to put diffusion in front of it. It is a totally diffuse source. A bit on cameras and camcorders. Absolutely the big news at the show in cameras, Blackmagic Design's cinema camera. That's it there. It's got a 2432 by 1366 image sensor in it. They call it 2.5K. They say it's 13 stops, but it's 15.8 by 8.9 millimeters, which is smaller than 4/3 but bigger than Super 16. And it'll use either Canon EF or Zeiss ZE lenses. It has an integrated battery. Now, according to their spec sheet, the battery lasts 90 minutes and takes 2 hours to charge, but you can't replace it. So if you've shot for 90 minutes, you now have to plug in to something. It has an integrated solid-state drive, and that does pop out. 5-inch display, 800 by 480 touchscreen. It has HD SDI and Thunderbolt and USB connections, and the package includes DaVinci Resolve, which is normally about $1,000, and Ultrascope, which is normally about $700, and Media Express, so you can use Thunderbolt and get video out of it, and the whole thing is $3,000. Now, I say the whole thing is $3,000. That's the price from Blackmagic Design. By the time you add on everything that you want, including a nice lens, maybe you're talking $10,000. But $10,000 is still considerably lower than the lowest price for a Red. And so that's why people are interested in this. Sony introduced in the US, at IBC they introduced it originally, the HDC 2000, 2500, 2550, which Alex Shapiro at their press conference called the finest broadcast camera available. And I take issue with that because I think they're damning it with faint praise. This is a spectacular broadcast camera. It is 12 dB quieter than the 1500. You look at this on a waveform monitor, and it's something you haven't seen since before the days of HD. It's flat line. It's amazing. And you can take that in sensitivity, or take half of it in sensitivity, half of it in noise improvement, whatever you want. This is a plastic model of a gun, but it's the real size. And this is a camcorder that sticks on the gun. So when the cop shoots somebody, there's pictures of it. It's made by a Chinese company called AEE. It's the HD Mini DV, and it has a built-in laser sight to, quote, frighten the goal. And then this was a very interesting camera from JVC. Most people were interested in the JVC 4K camera, and I'll show you that in a moment, but this one I found much more interesting. It's a camera intended for news. It's got a 23 times zoom lens built in. Multi-format, you can do Avid or Apple or anything you want. It's got 2 codecs, so you can do a proxy coding while you're doing your main coding. It has built-in FTP and Wi-Fi and costs about $5,500. So that was pretty interesting. Here are some other cameras. Canon had EOS. This is like their DSLRs, except more video-oriented. This is the Panasonic balsa wood mock-up, but you got to say about Panasonic's balsa wood mock-ups, they usually bring something out the next year. So that's okay. Here's the JVC little 4K, and this is Sony's little camera, new little camera, the HXR NX30, under $2,000, wider angle pictures than almost anything else, aimed to compete with some small cameras from Canon and Panasonic. Storage. Okay, you record on your hard drive or solid state or something, then what? Well, you can have somebody else do the storage for you, and at NAB, the University of Southern California introduced their digital repository. You give it to them, they maintain the archive, they migrate to whatever the new format is, and so on. Fuji did the same thing, introducing PermaVault, actually only introducing it to the broadcast and video industry. They'd been doing it in the medical industry previously. You pay them a per terabyte per month fee, and you have online access to anything you want, and they maintain the archive. In optical, a new company called H-Vault had holographic storage. Sony, I'm skipping this middle one for a moment, had this ODS D55U, 12 disc cartridges, blue cartridges, so basically the capacity of 12 Blu-ray layers. JVC introduced this very practical thing available right now. It's an HD SDI connected Blu-ray recorder. You take your HD SDI, stick it right into the Blu-ray, you get a Blu-ray disc out of it. Other stuff, of course, there were many 4K recorders. This is Aja's KeyPro Quad, which does 4K recording. And then back to the rack. In the past few years, there have been lots of little handheld recorders. And now everyone's racking them up. So this is the Aja KeyPro rack. This is the Cinedec MX. That's a full rack width. This is the Cinedec RX, which is a half rack width. And this is the Sound Devices Pix 260, again, half rack width. So we're in the tapeless era, but must it be tape archived? You heard from Craig that HBO is putting everything onto LTO. The blue disc optical system that Sony has, maybe that's too low in I/O speed. Solid state drives, wonderful, but too expensive. Hard drives don't last very long, which is why the archives have to keep migrating. But two things might be nice, but they weren't at NAB, although they were at HPA. One is RDX. It's archival for 30 plus years. It is a hard drive system, so it has hard drive access speeds available from multiple sources. That's it over there. And then Group 47, which bought technologies from Kodak, Digital Optical Technology System, that's this shiny silver stuff, archival for 100 plus years, non-magnetic, and even immune to electromagnetic pulse. By the way, one thing introduced by Panasonic, Micro P2. And that's in the SD form factor. You can get a 64 gigabit card in SD size, but it has all of the other stuff that you expect of P2, the very high data rates, backup, and so on. Processing. Quantel introduced Revolution Q. That's a diagram of it. The most exciting part of it for me was this. They used cheap off-the-shelf components for the processing and the storage. Nothing proprietary to Quantel. The C is actually supposed to stand for commercial, but I prefer cheap. Oral Sonic, last year I mentioned House 119 has these interesting panels that have built-in group delays of audio. New company showed up this year called Oral Sonic, but it appears to be the exact same product. That's their absorption. Inexpensive motion compensating high definition frame rate conversion. Now this is the stuff that you used to pay $500,000 for. Now Snell has it down to about $36,000, Caliber showing it for less than $30,000. As Craig mentioned, HEVC, the high efficiency video codec, designated as H265 and built in up to 7680 by 4320 at 120 frames per second. That's the NHK 8K system. And then there's that space-time creation stuff that I was mentioning. This is a line of 40 GoPro Hero cameras that are used for the kinds of shots where somebody jumps up in the air and then freezes and then the camera goes around. That's the array for that. And then this is an image from that Project Find that I was talking about. This is looking down at a soccer field, actual video image of the soccer players running around. There's obviously no camera up there. It's just created from the 3D space of having a few cameras in the soccer field. Compact routing, Sierra Video took up the same kind of thing that Blackmagic Design was doing. And then many people pushing alternatives to Final Cut Pro because of what Apple did. Distribution. Belden comes up with 1776 mic cable. This woman sitting in the chair is being suspended by a strand of mic cable. And they thought that wasn't heavy enough, so they started piling bricks on her. In the lab, Belden found it'll go to about 430 pounds of force before it breaks. At the show, it kept breaking sooner. They got up to 300-something pounds, but it always broke at the connections. They also introduced waterproof BNCs, and because Belden has now bought Telecast, they had a fiber intercom system. So you can stick your 2-wire intercom system, RTS or Clearcom, or one of the matrix systems, either RTS or Clearcom, run a single fiber to someplace else, and the intercom goes with it. ADJA introduced T-Tap, which is a Thunderbolt to HDSDI system. Advanced Fiber Products had their normal through optical switch, which is basically a normaling patch field for fiber. You can plug stuff in and it normals. Yes?
King's had one for a while.
Yeah, King's had one, and there was also one from Audio Devices. Sony introduced the NXL IP55. It's an HD to IP and vice versa converter. You can send up to 3 HDs over the IP gen-locked, and they can be all 3 in one direction or 2 one way and 1 the other way. And then 5 gigahertz unlicensed systems. LancerLink Skywave had a wireless camera system, seemed to be very reliable, and Leon had an intercom system, both of them in the 5 gigahertz band. This is the Switch, a nice local New York company. Originally, it was just for moving stuff around New York. Now they have all of these locations, including London, and are transmitting uncompressed HD. And then this was a cute thing, Toshiba's NP engine. Normally, when you're serving stuff, you need to have the server's CPU and memory deal with it. This is hardware to go directly from the solid-state drive to IP without bothering the server. You can have up to 64,000 streams, up to 40 gigabits per second. Doesn't use server CPU, doesn't use server memory, reduces space by 70% and power by 77%. And does it work? Well, here's a system that Pixelmetrics came up with that simulates actual use of streams from a server, so you don't just say, oh yeah, people are going to watch the show. People might watch 15 seconds of the show, turn it off, and come back later and look at something else. So this does things the way that people do them. Presentation 1, the long view. Toshiba 3D LED screen. I said, great, I want to look at that. They said, okay, see that person over there wearing the blue shirt? Go over there and look from there. Presentation 2, the short view. This is a headline that I really liked in PC World. Panasonic's newest TV prototype is too big for your living room. It's a 145-inch 8K TV. But if we're talking 8K, which is the super high vision system, they suggest that the viewing distance be 0.75 of the picture height. Now, the distance that people watch TV at is 9 feet, so for 0.75 height at 9 feet, the height would be 144 inches, which means that your TV set would have to be 294-inch or a 25-foot TV. So 8K, really good for delivery in a movie theater. This is an ARI brochure. They're saying people from this point forward with 20/20 vision can see 8K. From this point forward, they can see 4K. From this point forward, they can see 3K. Presentation 3, electronic viewfinders, a new one from Band Pro, 1920 by 1080 liquid crystal. Some people were wondering if anyone can see that on something that tiny. And this is from an Estonian company, Kinotechnik, and this is just the menu for that viewfinder. Projection. Panasonic introduced the PT-DZ21KU, which is this. It's the smallest 20,000 lumen projector because it's using 4 465-watt UHM lamps. Previously, UHM lamps only went to 220 watts. And Red introduced, or sort of introduced, a laser projector, which people were discussing as a consumer product, something in the under $10,000 range. This was the warning label on it: dangerous thinking, delusional deadlines, and so on. Now, what they showed was 3D, and there were really horrendous ghosts, but they said at the beginning there are really horrendous ghosts. We're working on that. So I can't tell you how good it is in absolute terms, but I will say that I didn't see any of the problems that I would expect of a laser projector. There was no speckle. There was no scanning indication, anything like that. Presentation 5, Canon showing a display, a 4K display. Canon showing a display. Yes, they've had LCD displays for a while, and that was a hot thing at the show. And finally, the urinals in the Las Vegas hotel. This was Las Vegas, but I was supposed to be third. I've changed to second, so let's hold the questions, I guess, until after David. David, come down.
This would be the cube? Good. Let's see if it works. Hello. Oh, I see, okay. Geez, how do you follow Mark Schubin? You don't, that's right. And, you know, Mark, Mr. Comprehensive Schumann, Mark, you do it better than anybody. And in fact, I was concerned about going in front of you as well, but you know, you did me a favor because you covered in detail so many of the slides that I'm about to show that I'm going to whiz through them so that we can get to the Q&A faster. These are just notes. I'm going to show you something that's highly idiosyncratic. I, as contributing editor of Millimeter Magazine, have covered NAB for well over 2 decades and written fairly in-depth and extensive notes on NAB, covering many of the same categories that Mark just went over, including once upon a time telecines too. Years ago, I used to pride myself on walking every single aisle of NAB. And the only other person I ever heard that ever did that was Mark Schubin. And Mark, I think you still do it. I can't do it anymore. I don't know how you do it because I tried and I just got, you know, NAB is an intense beehive. And you get into conversations, you spend too much time at one booth, and before you know it, the entire event is over. And then it comes to that last sawed-off rump of a day where you run around like a maniac and try to see all the things that you didn't quite catch. What I did this year, what I'm going to show you this year, are just things that I was personally interested in. I'm not going to try to be comprehensive. I don't need to be, because I couldn't top what you just did, Mark. And I've put some thought into what NAB meant to me. And one of the things I want to go through really quickly is my version of a recap of last year, because the more I thought about it, the more it felt to me like last year's NAB was an earthquake, and this year's NAB were the aftershocks. For instance, 3D last year, cameras everywhere, exciting. Super 35 was just appearing in all sorts of new products. 4K, really exciting. Sony, of course, came out with a 4K camera that, in effect, is true 4K with using an 8K sensor. This year, they had production versions of it, but that was groundbreaking. Solid-state drives, solid-state discs, whichever, in lots of products last year. That was really a trend. I hadn't seen that before, and it seemed to be a certain moment where everybody was doing that. Final Cut Pro 10. Now, you all are going to disagree with me, probably, but I happen to think it's a breakthrough. We're going to have a June meeting where Apple is going to try to explain Final Cut 10, but I thought it was a breakthrough, and so did all the people in that moment who attended the Final Cut Pro users group, and you can see there were quite a few of them. It's only later that people had different thoughts about that. LEDs. Lots of great stuff last year. The Airy lights, Fresnels, glass Fresnels for the first time. Lenses, lots of great stuff. Also, for the first time, devices like little pieces of gearing to allow Nikon lenses to be added to follow focuses, follow focus systems. Let's see, what else have I got up there? That looks like Mitch Gross. With an adapter that permits ENG 2/3 inch camera zooms to be adapted to Super 35 cameras. At Able Cinetech they have that, which was it's a really big deal for reasons I'll explain in a few moments. Rigs, and what do I mean by that? I mean ways of carrying the camera around. What I've done here is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, because I think these rigs are kind of ridiculous. Look, these are all SLRs on these gigantic, enormous things. You swing around with something like this and hit somebody, and there's going to be a lawsuit. I shoot a lot of documentary, and I do a lot of handheld work, so I'm especially sensitive to these issues. And as well, I'm not as young as I used to be, and I don't want heavy cameras. I don't want to add weight. I want to take weight away. Mobility. And as Mark mentioned, this is an octocopter. This is a fantastic device, which I've actually seen being used. I mean, this is complete fluid mobility in almost all axes, very intuitively operated. I just thought that was a stunning development. Now, I think that the fight between film and digital is over. This was a year in which Kodak declared bankruptcy. It was a year in which Arri's Alexa pretty much conquered U.S. dramatic episodic TV. I'd like to think these guys are shaking hands, though, because going forward, I feel that in the past, I feel there's been a lot of this versus that, this technology versus that technology. I don't think that's true anymore. I think everyone is kind of coming together, dovetailing. Now, what's going to follow are just a lot of photographs. You won't have to read a lot of text. And I'll go pretty quickly. I'm just going to attitudinize on some of the things that you're seeing. This is a move cam like a cage, like a rig to hold an F3. And when I saw this, I thought, what a symbol, because it's everything but the camera. It's got the shape of the camera, but the camera's not there anymore. Certainly that's a symbol. And what I found particularly not to my tastes about this, is that this weighs more than the F3, I think. This thing's really heavy. Pick it up and, you feel like you have a camera on your shoulder. I don't understand that. Here's it from the other direction. See, it's the outline of a camera. It could be an art piece. It could be at the Whitney Biennial. You could suggest a camera. Now, this is sort of the same thing. This guy is from Cine Mechanics in Montreal. Nicest guy. And he made me put that on my shoulder, and I did, and it balanced. But I don't get this. Now, over at Red Rock Micro, they had like this whole area where you could just grab, kind of like Tinker Toys and like start putting things together. It brings out the erector set in every boy. And you could create things like that. And I don't get that either. And it's a generational thing, and I acknowledge it. I just don't get that. It's not something I want to go shoot with anywhere in the field. I did see this, which qualifies as something. I'm not sure quite what. You see the camera up here? I mean, the whole thing is functional, sort of. Now, I also found this, and I was interested, for reasons I'll go into in a moment, in ways of mounting cameras with hand grips. And this is Vocus. They're a Dutch company. This looks an awful lot like an Aton hand grip, but so be it. I don't know why you'd need one on either side of a camera this small, but hey. But look at this. As I've been saying for years, we're reaching a point where it's not a lens attached to a camera, it's a camera attached to a lens. So, I guess that appeals to somebody. This, I thought this is kind of interesting too, because you see both of these lights, they're on one stand. There's an extension arm, an added arm on this stand. And then here's the camera down here on, one of these little rigs. Now, all of this could fit just about in a briefcase or two. And that's a big deal in a time in which, we have to get through security at airports and we don't want to risk things not showing up. And I know that's big with me. I love putting these things into briefcases and packing them down. I just thought this was another symbol of the moment that we're in right now. This is Adam Wilt. For those of you who don't know him, Adam was the photographer of a lot of the images that Mark showed. And this is just to represent the fact that NAB has surprises. For instance, and Mark went over this in detail, so I won't, but this camera, 3K for 3K, which pretty much meets the criterion of the original Red Scarlet, which never quite came to fruition. But I thought I'd show you some pictures. Now, the back is touchscreen like an iPhone. And if nothing else, even if you think that this is not a real camera or it's got many compromises or you would never use this in a real production, you have to admire the user interface. It is of the moment, it is modern, and any kid could walk up and operate this. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. You see a lot of detail, it's right in front of you, you touch something, you don't even need a manual. You can figure it out just by looking at it. That's good design. This is it from the side. That's, whoops, there. Good. This is where the SSD goes in, solid state drive. This is a Zeiss Compact Prime. That would be the ZF mount? CE, thank you. I knew that didn't sound right. This is Canon, and this would be an EF mount. This is obviously a Canon zoom. And here's some close-ups of that. So you can see that you have to order one flavor or the other of this camera. You can also see the simplicity of the camera. This is a big red record button, which is a nice, not a bad place for it to be. Except that by putting a record button there, when you press it, the camera's going to angle up just naturally. Now this is, you can now see some of the data on the back. I don't know why this is not sharp. Sorry about that. But you can see this. This is how you would add notes, and there's a little keypad. And again, anyone that knows how to operate an iPad already knows how to operate this camera. And that's good design, not bad design. These are 1/4-20 holes, and this is for the carrying strap that no one ever uses. Now this is another sort of surprise. This is a Sony F3 with a lot of junk around it. And this is a lens that Sony just came out with for that camera. It's 18 to 252, I think. I hope I got that right. It has a couple of characteristics. It's really thick. It's really wide. It does have 3 servos in it, and it operates kind of like an ENG zoom would. You know, it has a servo for the iris, for the zoom, and for the focus. There is a built-in hand grip on the F3 that will operate this. It has a couple other characteristics, too. One is that it ramps. In other words, when you zoom towards the, not the wide end, but the long end, it gets darker. In fact, it shuts down to T6.3, I think, which is not great. It's okay if you're shooting outdoors. And also, it's the front of it, when you zoom, has this, it's the opposite of erectile dysfunction. It extends. And, you know, people from a still photography background have seen that or used to that. Those of us on the film side and broadcast side are probably a little, you know, taken aback to encounter that. Focus it, or zoom it rather, and it just shoots out like that. Now it's retracted. It's as short as it gets. And there you can see some buttons on the side, and it's got all the auto features that you would expect from a smaller camcorder. In fact, what this resembles on the F3 is a big Handycam. And there's a problem with a Handycam. When you have a Handycam, first of all, you hold it out in front of you. F3 from day one was too big to do that. I don't know why that didn't occur to anybody. Also, the viewfinder is in the very back of the F3. If you're holding it out in front of you and it's on your eye right here, your arms aren't going to last very long. So what would you naturally think you'd want to do? You'd want to put it on your shoulder. But you can't do that because the viewfinder is in back of your ear. So this NAB, Sony showed this really interesting kind of origami-like device. It somehow fits onto the side of the camera. This is the flip-out screen on the F3, and then it drops this viewing tube with a diopter in it over. Now, the image looks pretty good. The problem still is ergonomics, because where are you supposed to be when you're looking through this thing? Again, it doesn't solve the handheld issue. Now, the handheld issue is a big deal, because those of us who come out of cinema are used to ergonomically designed cinema cameras, film cameras. Those of us who come out of the broadcast side have been using Betacam type camcorders for years that fit on your shoulder, and everything's in the right place, and the viewfinder's up front near the lens, and everything just makes sense. When the Handycam style camcorders arrived, that was fine because you could hold them out in front of you and they were small and didn't weigh very much. But these cameras, and this F3 is a Super 35 sensor camera, they are heavier and they require heavier lenses, ergo they are front heavy. You cannot hold them out in front of you for more than a few minutes, and this is from experience, time after time. I'm trying to tame these cameras. I'll explain that in a few minutes. So here is a Sony FS700 that Mark mentioned. It's the one that can go up to 240 frames a second. Beautiful, beautiful slow-mo, by the way. Kind of extraordinary. And it has, wonder of wonders, it has an Arri rosette on it. Can you imagine that? And what that allows you to do is, this is a hand grip extension made for Arriflex that has a Arri rosette on either end, and I simply took the hand grip and I extended it. You see the cable that's going into the lank at the end? This is Juan Martinez of Sony, but this is a design that I put together, and actually this was at NAB and being shown around, because I'm really, really trying to make these cameras truly usable. Now, the one thing that's missing, here's Juan's head, but where's the viewfinder? You can see where the viewfinder ought to be. It just isn't there. There isn't one. It begs a lot of questions. Why wasn't the viewfinder put there? Why isn't there a viewfinder that can float around the camera? I mean, it's 2012? So what I did is I went on a hunt of viewfinders, electronic viewfinders, and Mark already went through this, and he did a very good job, so I'm just going to very quickly. This is the Alphatron. Believe it or not, is this Dutch or Belgium? Belgian company? It's Stevie Logic. But in any case, this actually is the screen of an iPhone. This is a Retina display. They got from the same source Apple did, and they got a Retina display and they put it in there. Now, there's a problem with this approach. This thing is big. See how big that person's hand is and how big this thing is? Now, if you've got a little camera and it's a Super 35 size sensor and it has a big, heavy lens in front of it, do you really want to add more weight to the front of the camera? That's not really solving the problem. It's making the camera front heavy all over again. This is the other Estonian finder that Mark mentioned. This would be a Cineroid finder. This points out another problem. How do these finders get powered? And by the way, the finders usually take an HDMI signal or HDSDI, but they're often powered by a battery. Why? Because they can't draw external power from these camcorders like an F3 because there's no provision for that. Another addition of weight to the front of the camera. Here is the Band Pro EVF that Mark mentioned. The finders I think that are best designed are the Arri finder, which this is. This is beautifully done. Look how small and compact it is. Well, of course, Arri knows what they're doing. Like the finder's hardly bigger than the eyepiece. That's the right way. And Red, who, developed this a number of years ago, picked it up from a crew in Scotland who had previously developed it. But this is brilliant. It's really well done. It's the right size. It's self-contained. Of course, it's powered by the camera. That's the way to do it. I'm dying to get something like this for ordinary cameras. These cameras we're working with today. Now, very quickly, I was going to go through lenses, but I'm going to skip that. Mark has kind of mentioned that, and I want to get to the Q&A. So this would be Canon, and these are Canon's future products. And, of course, Canon is becoming the 4K camera. I'm sorry, the 4K company per their own goals. And these are all lenses that they would describe as 4K lenses. Now, someone recently asked me, what about a 4K filter? And I have to admit, I don't know what a 4K lens is, and I don't know what a 4K filter is. But I presume it means that it's a little bit sharper. But if that were the case, I'd want it on, an HD camera that was Super 35. You can't be too rich, too thin, or have too much resolution in a lens. Of course, with these higher promised MTFs and resolutions are going to come higher prices. The cameras may be getting down to $3,000, but the lenses sure ain't. Okay, if you've ever wanted to see how one of Canon's image-stabilized zooms works, this was an incredible cross-section. I'd never seen this before. And this is the part that has the micro gyroscopes in it and senses the position of the camera and the shake of the camera and the vibration and counters it with an element that's in this position in the zoom. Let's see. Oh, this is interesting. This is a Lomo PL mount lens. Lomo is a longtime Russian lens maker with their Illumina series, and I saw this floating around NAB, and I just thought I'd take a snapshot of it. And they're excellent, by the way. Russians have been, looking down on us from space for a long time. They can make great optics also. This is John Fishburne over at 16 by 9 and Band Pro, and he has something that it's about time that's come to these cameras. And this is obviously bellows, and this is a shift tilt kind of arrangement. And I think that's fantastic. This is a wireless lens controller over at, I'm forgetting the name of the stand. Oh, Jag 35, thank you. And this is, with one motor, it's about $1,300. And the reason I'm mentioning the cost is because that's breakthrough. That's amazing for a wireless lens controller. And you see it's attached to this red. So in terms of anything that's solid state and electronic, prices just seem to keep coming down and coming down. Now I'm going to show you a few lights that I liked. I like this light panel. It looks like an overhead fluorescent, but it's really an LED. It's 2 feet by 4 feet, 250 watt. And I just thought the light coming off it was amazing. It stopped me in my tracks. It's about 25 pounds. Very nice. This is one of the gentlemen at Aurora who's showing a Fresnel that they're coming out with, which has a lenticular Fresnel plastic lens, just like a similar product over at Light Panels, which some of you are probably familiar with. But I thought it's interesting that that technology is catching on too. And you can see that because it's a lenticular Fresnel, it's very thin. Look at the arrangement of LEDs in this light. We're in a kind of Cambrian explosion of different lighting life forms right now. All different kinds of ideas are being tried. It's just really exciting. This is it's kind of like a ring light. I saw this over at B&H. It's a rotolight, and it's called A something, and I can't read that over there. But what you do is you turn this dial, and this is a bicolor light. It has circles of tungsten balanced and daylight balanced LEDs. And as you turn that knob, it adjusts the color temperature. Because it's round, the reflection you see in people's eyes is that circular reflection that ring lights provide. It's not a ring light. You can't put a camera in the center, but you can fake it. The producer will think you had a ring light. I thought that was really cool. And look how thin it is. Mark mentioned another light that was super thin. This one, it's Xylite. What I liked about this is you see this rubber bellows. This doesn't show it as well as I would have liked, but as he's adjusting the focus of the Fresnel, and it's a glass Fresnel, this rubber bellows expands. What a cool idea. I don't mean that as a pun, but what a great idea. You couldn't do that with a hot light because the rubber bellows wouldn't survive. I picked this thing up, and you're expecting it to be light. It's not light. It's really heavy. A lot of umbrellas. As a lighting person, I think that's cool. You can do, instant John Richardson stuff. This happens to be at the Red, but I just noticed this, and this was very dramatic. Now, Mark also mentioned Hive. At last September at our SMPTE meeting, we did a lighting meeting, and Hive came and gave a very quick, sort of sketchy overview of their products. This is the bulb, and this bulb it lasts 10,000 hours. As Mark said, at 450 megahertz, there's not going to be any strobing issues. The bulb is stuck down in this reflector, and there's a white disc on top of the bulb, so the bulb is never raw. I think the disc serves to diffuse, maybe protect. I'm not really sure, and I couldn't get a straight answer. But anyway, that's what it looks like. And, oops, sorry. Oh, I'm missing something. Sorry about that. I was going to show you a picture of the lights. Maybe it'll come up later. Maybe I dropped it somehow. So I always like to make fun of this company because they set themselves up. You ought to be able to tell by the dramatic vitrine design that this is red, right? And sure enough, they have a flare. And I was going to show the same thing that Mark showed, but Mark beat me to it. So, and I know, Adam was there too, so I know, like minds. This is Sony's 4K consumer projector, which I spent quite a bit of time adjusting and experimenting with. At NAB, I shot a test reel of slow-mo using the Sony FS700, and it was played back in the 4K projector, and the 4K projector wasn't properly set up. So I spent literally a couple of hours working with this projector. And to give you a sense of the size of the projector, it's really quite small. I won't pull it out now, but this is just a little Western Digital drive. It's very small. Thanks, Bruce. This is like wallet-sized. So this thing is really, really compact, and it's kind of shocking that it's come to this. This is a really interesting matte box system that's based on a rubber bellows over at Manfrotto. This is, Mark mentioned this too, but this camera has FTP capability. This is JVC's camera that can wirelessly send off files from the field. This is JVC's 4K camcorder, the one I talked about when we did the 4K session, and this thing is just tiny. It's smaller than I thought it would be. What that means, I don't know. Maybe that's why it's only $5,000. It's by the pound. But this thing, now this thing I came across, I just stumbled across this, and why am I showing you this? Well, this is Velcro strapped holder for a wireless receiver rather. It's part of a wireless kit. For years, I've been clipping wireless receivers onto these hand grips on camcorders, and someone at Sony saw me doing it, and I saw this, and I went to them and I said, I know where you got that idea, and they admitted it. So I guess I've left my mark in the world. Now, interestingly enough, and Mark mentioned this is the blimp that Lockheed Martin was showing, or a group of enterprises that were gathered together under the Lockheed Martin name. This is one of the quad rotor devices. I won't spend any time on this, but interestingly enough, where's the propulsion on this? It doesn't have any propulsion. How do you move it around? You use this. And this is a really, really cool device. This is exactly what you think it is. It's derived from drone technology. And I noticed that there's no landing gear. It's a pretty sizable thing. And so I said to the people there, I said, well, you know. Oh, by the way, I should have told you that rotor, that quad rotor, also can drag the thing around. And that's how they move it around. It doesn't move on its own. The little blimp doesn't have any propulsion system. So on this plane, how do they land it? And I looked at the camera here and I said, this just feels wrong, right? Well, this is, believe it or not, these are rubber cushiony things. And as this drone is coming down, this camera pod retracts up into the body, and the rubbery cushiony things kind of bounce a little bit. You know, like every time we drop something onto Mars, like a little robot, it like goes through the atmosphere and bounces, and that's what this does. Hopefully not, you know, that damages the wings. But of course the propeller's spinning, so I said, well, now how does that work? Because the propeller is much longer than, you know, this distance here. Believe it or not, these are hinged propellers. And when this hits the ground, the hinged propellers bend up. And I had that demonstrated. I'm astonished. I would never think that would work. Of course, I wandered over to the NICT as well and saw the same thing. I thought this was pretty interesting. Now, if you walk off about 40 degrees to the side, kind of where these guys are, what you see is this. That's when it begins to fall apart. So they had this cordon so that you couldn't do that. But nonetheless, you know, it's kind of like a talking dog or cat. It's not what they say, it's the fact they can talk at all. The fact that this thing worked at all was extraordinary. And like Mark, I walked back and forth and looked at every angle, and I never would have believed that something like this could work, but it did. Of course, 200 projectors is kind of a costly, you know, penalty to pay to have just a display. You know, I don't know that this is ever going to be practical. Now, this is just an oddity I came across. It's Sony. These are binoculars, and they're image stabilized. And I looked through them, and I just couldn't. I don't know. It just felt weird to me, and it felt weird to John too. This is John Alpert, who shoots a lot of HBO documentaries. And it's a wrap. That's all I've got. Thank you.